If a critical mineral like silver is so important to national security, you could charge $1,000 an ounce. It really doesn't matter because we can just print a blank check to fulfill that order. What better way to generate revenue than to have the ability to print an unlimited amount of money? And the average Joe just isn't aware of it. And so that design is intentional to keep us indebted. They're never going to give up that power. And it's to their benefit that we continue to be slaves.
We're talking about the debasement of the dollar. It's being invaluable. You gave the recommendations to people. You got to get money out of the system. Now, what about the fear of individuals who may have not invested into silver in recent times because there's volatility? So silver is very volatile. It can move 5, 10% swings in a matter of hours, minutes. What would you give as a recommendation to those individuals who have been buying gold all this time, but now are actually considering silver as part of their investment when it comes to this volatility?
Great question. Let's put on our tinfoil hat for a second. I know that won't be hard for some viewers to do. The silver stackers, the gold stackers are big time conspiracy theorists. But here's why I'll describe the volatility is 100% intentional. A few years ago, I think it was around 2011, 2012. You guys can fact check me, look it up. We had a release of files known as WikiLeaks, where Julian Assange released a whole database of confidential, top secret files, and he published them on the internet. And out of these thousands and thousands of files, there was one file in particular that all gold and silver stackers should be aware of. And it was a wire, a communications wire from London going back to the State Department in the United States. And the London Bullion Association made reference to gold. And here's what they said explicitly: we do not want the general public accumulating gold. And here's how we can prevent the public from investing in gold. We will create artificial volatility that will scare the average retail investor from ever considering investing in gold. So we have in a government document that thankfully was released of the London Bullion Metals Association and the US State Department admitting that the volatility is intentional to prevent retail investors from getting in.
You're saying the government has specified that they are intentionally being volatile in gold in order to stop retail investors from coming in, to scare them away? Is this a
100%.
national security statement?
100% it is. And it goes back to the banking cartel on Jekyll Island that devised the system of the Federal Reserve that I was talking about earlier, because that's the biggest threat to this banking cartel and a fiat currency. If people decided to stop saving in fiat dollars and other assets, and they started saving in gold and silver, that's the biggest threat to this entire establishment. And that's why they discuss creating the volatility to intentionally keep people away. So here's what I would say to anyone that just stacks gold and doesn't stack silver. And for the record, even though I'm Silver Degen and the vast majority of my net worth is in silver, I still have exposure to gold. I still think there's a place for it. With that being said, though, the volatility that you've seen recently in silver is so extreme that I think that is the alarm bell telling you how vital it is to the US government and other worldwide governments here on Earth, including China. The more volatility you see, I think the more desperate they are to accumulate as much as they can. And once, let's just say, God forbid, that this 5-day war that's taken place in the Middle East, if it escalates, so far there's over 20 countries that are involved in this conflict. If this escalates into a global conflict, these trade lines and this friendly interaction between countries where they openly trade, that will stop. And I think it's probably a reason why this volatility has existed. I think some of these government entities are trying to maximize their allocation as quickly as possible before these trade lines get shut down and they're not able to exchange with other countries. That's what I think. Time will tell whether my hypothesis is accurate. The higher the volatility, the more interest these government entities have in that particular commodity. And I don't think there's anything more volatile right now than silver. I mean, we've had a 50% move peak to trough in silver, which is unheard of. I mean, what other asset or commodity has a 50% move over a span of a couple of weeks?
So would you say that volatility is actually a good indicator for you to actually get into the silver market because it's just a forward-looking view of what governments are trying to get in and distract us from owning it so that they own it first?
Absolutely. 100%. I think the common question that I get on X is, well, silver's already had a 3X run. Is that it? Am I too late? The short answer is no, you're not too late. All the things that we discussed previously in this interview from the supply and demand standpoint, none of that's gotten resolved. And there's no indications that it gets resolved anytime soon. I still think we're in the first inning of this bull run. I'm of the belief that, between now and say 2032, triple digit silver will become the norm. And I would not be surprised whatsoever, and I'll be ultra conservative here, that by 2032, I think $500 silver will be the norm.
You heard it, $500 silver, 2032. We're going to catch up with you 6 years from now.
That's right. Look, it might prove to be conservative because look at our current money supply, right? Like, will we stop printing money or will we print more money? And so $500 silver might sound crazy right now, but if our currency continues to be diluted, that $500 today might not go as far in 2032.
Correct. And, that brings up another aspect of the gold silver ratio. As we talk about the $500 silver that you just brought up, how do you think people should be thinking about gold silver ratio when it relates to shorter term span within the 24 months, silver hitting $150, $200? Should people be looking at that ratio when making their decisions on getting into silver, or is it completely separated? They should just get into silver because of the value that silver has inherently.
So if you have zero exposure or minimal exposure to silver, you need to go ahead and take a position, regardless of what the gold to silver ratio is. And I won't tell you what percentage that is because the answer varies depending on your age and your investment thesis, et cetera. But at a bare minimum, you need some form of exposure to silver. Once you have that exposure to silver, I think the GSR does come into play. And there's many people in my community on X, this is something we talk about on a daily basis. The GSR getting back to, let's say, 30-1 is totally reasonable. And I think it's something that could happen within 2 to 3 years, if not sooner. And it might even could surpass 30-1. It might could get down in a short time frame, maybe for a limited time, even as low as 10-1, where 10 ounces of silver buys you 1 ounce of gold. And to be honest, the reason that I'm a Silver Degen is that particular trade, the GSR, is something I viewed when doing all of my analysis to determine what trade I needed to get into was, low key. I guess you could say that I'm maybe a gold bull because I want as much gold as possible, but it's so darn expensive that I think, and we're about to see how good of a trader I am, I think that I can increase my gold position by buying as much silver as I can now. And as that gold to silver ratio starts to decrease, I can start to rotate out in tranches and accumulate more gold for the silver that I've purchased today, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And, you know, one thing that we haven't spoken about this entire interview is the actual physical buying of silver. Like we're talking about silver, you should buy it. But your experience and your exposure with your community, what should people actually be buying when it relates to silver? Like, should they be buying paper silver on the counter exchange or physical silver? And if it's physical silver, what type of silver should they be buying?
Yeah. So the old adage, you don't hold it, you don't own it, is true, and it's widely accepted within my community on X. Here's the caveat that I'll give to some people that are stuck in equities markets and don't have the opportunity to get out of those equity markets. For example, maybe you have a 401k, a Roth IRA. With the institution you're with, you don't have the ability to accumulate physical silver. I'll give you guys a pass, and I'll say there's a certain product from Sprott Physical Trust called PSLV, and that's one paper product that I would allow if holding physical metals is totally out of the question, and whatever investment vehicle you're in doesn't allow you to get out. But that's 5 to 10% of the community. For everyone else that has the ability to exit paper markets, which I think is of the utmost importance, especially right now with everything that's happening globally, you need to extract your wealth out of the system before we incur one of these boom bust cycles that I referenced earlier. I think at some point we're going to see a bank run like we've seen several times in the past, where everyone goes to the bank in a panic and they try to extract their liquidity. They're going to panic and go into physical gold and silver. So to answer your question, physical silver, being an American, I favor the American Silver Eagles. I favor the junk silver, the constitutional silver, the 90%. And the beauty of both of those products, I mentioned the fear trade, a bank run where everyone gets in a complete panic. And I solemnly believe we are within 12 months of this happening. Those products that I mentioned, the American Silver Eagle and the Constitutional Silver, historically have carried a massive premium during those fear trades. So when the bank runs go to occur, people get in panic. They think they're about to lose it all. They rush to buy something they have faith and trust in, which is a Silver Eagle made by the U.S. Mint, or Constitutional Silver, which was made by the U.S. Mint. The Constitutional Silver during these fear trades, historically, we've saw premiums go as high as 40%, so 40% over spot. And on the American Silver Eagle, we've seen premiums get as high as 120% over the spot price of silver. And like I said, I think we're within 12 months of that fear trade occurring. What will create this fear trade? I can't tell you 100%, but there's just so many things happening in the world right now that I think we're very close to a bank run and people panicking out of paper markets.
Yeah, and we've seen it all this year happening. I'm actually curious to know your position with the premiums increasing because of the supply and demand. Do you think people should still buy at those current premiums when they are at the prices they are, irrespective, on the basis that silver still has so much movement to go up? It's just cost of entry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll back that answer up with the historical data that I referenced earlier. If premiums right now on American Silver Eagles, and I'm just going to take a guess, I'm not looking at prices, but let's assume they're around 10% right now, which I believe is probably accurate. If historically we go back and we chart the price of premiums over the course of, let's say, the past 20 years, anytime, we have the great financial crisis of 2008, we had COVID, we had 2022, 2023, those premiums go back to 100% plus. Buying today at a 10% premium in hindsight will look like the greatest trade ever. It's kind of a no-brainer. And your downside, in my opinion, is really limited. What's your downside? You're paying a 10% premium? Well, I don't know of many times that there's never been a premium on American Silver Eagles. You could probably make the argument that the best bang for your buck right now today, in terms of product to buy, is your constitutional silver, your 90% silver. In some cases, it will have a negative premium. So from a trade perspective, if you're trying to get the most bang for your buck, to me it makes a whole lot of sense to buy that constitutional silver at no premium and or a negative premium. And if and when those premiums spike to 30 or 40%, maybe you consider trading in some of that constitutional silver when everyone's panicking and you rotate into generic rounds. And by doing that one trade, you've increased your silver weight by 30 or 40% without any money coming out of your pocket.
That's really informative. Is a lot of times we always get this question of like, the premium. We're talking about, I guess, gold buyers versus silver buyers, and our conversation is like, should you get into silver as well? And the premium is always a point of contention. But I feel that a lot of times people forget that unlike gold, silver has much more of a volatile upward swing where the premiums do cancel out. Yeah, it could be 10%, but the upside can be 3 times higher versus gold. But again, this is just relative to different precious metals. Um, one thing I want to ask too is with regards to, I guess, selling your silver. You mentioned about trading. How should people navigate that in more in depth when they're getting into silver? Should when they sell, are you saying that they should then buy a different position within the precious metals or just keep it as fiat?
Yeah, great question. So I don't have any plans of taking my net worth back into fiat currency. It makes zero sense to me. So when this volatility spike occurs, and let's say premiums are 30, 40% on silver products, in the case of American Silver Eagles, maybe as high as 100%, 120%, I'm going to be looking at ways to increase the size of my stack. And that's something we focus a lot on the X platform within the community, doing these spaces we referenced earlier. It's something we talk about on a daily basis. So all I'm looking to do is increase the size of my stack. There's lots of trades within the trade, right? I'm trying to increase my silver position as much as possible. When premiums spike, maybe I want to rotate into generic rounds or a different product. When the GSR falls, maybe I want to rotate out of my generic rounds into more gold. But to answer your question, there's no other asset that offers this risk to reward setup that I've mentioned than gold and silver. So I'm not rotating out of anything else, at least for the foreseeable future. I'll reevaluate come 2032 to see where other ratios are at. We're talking about ratios a lot here, premium ratios, gold to silver ratios, something the viewers should be cognizant of. You guys should be looking at gold to the S&P 500. What does that ratio look like? Where has it been historically? What about silver to the S&P 500? Where is that ratio currently at? Where has it been historically? Silver to housing. What is that ratio today? How many ounces of silver does it take you to buy the average home in America? And the reason I think these ratios are so important is if our currency is being printed out of thin air at record levels, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me to evaluate a value contrived in fiat currency because it changes every day. It makes more sense to me to evaluate the value of equities, of real estate, of other assets priced in gold or priced in silver. And we have a long history of that data to see whether it's relatively cheap or relatively inexpensive. And maybe at some point in time, come 2032, I'll reevaluate these ratios, and maybe I unload a monster box for like 20 acres of farmland at some point. But right now, we're nowhere near the lows, and so I don't think rotating out of anything makes sense. That's why I'm just trying to increase the size of my stack and get right now as much silver as possible. I think it's the best trade setup, and at some point in time, I think it would be reasonable to maybe buy a home for a couple of monster boxes.
And that's good insight, because a lot of people, they're like, okay, I own all this metal and then I sell it. What do I do with it? I mean, I have a price target. It sounds to me that you're in line with what we even talk to our viewers. It's about just converting it from one asset to another, such as a home.
And one other thing I'll mention too. This is something I love about Summit. For the viewers that don't know this, if you see a trade setup that you're wanting to take advantage of, let's say you're ready to trade some silver in for some gold at some point down the line. It's as simple as picking up the phone or sending an email to Summit Metals and say, hey, I have 100 ounces of silver. I would like to trade for X amount of ounces of gold. And it's kind of turnkey. It's one phone call, one email. This is what I'm wanting to do. You get a response and you're done. So for the viewers that don't know, Summit Metals can handle those trades for you just with a phone call.
Yeah, thank you for that shout out. And, I want to just wrap this up with a couple last lingering questions, two actually. And it's more about, what is one myth in the silver community that you just wish would die?
A Tomahawk missile has 500 ounces of silver. I'm so tired of hearing that, especially right now. It's relevant today more than ever. Yeah, that myth, that it's just something I've seen a lot lately. If there's like, let's say for example, in our iPhones or your cell phone, there's 1 gram of silver in that device, and it's used in like soldering connections or making connections. How does that translate into a monster box of silver in a missile? And the other part of that is, show me where the US government has released top secret information that said, oh, yeah, we use 500 ounces of silver per Tomahawk missile. If that were the case, you're like going to your greatest enemies and you're saying, hey, guys, if you corner the silver market, you can make us inept. You can take us out of the battlefield. So it makes, to me, that doesn't make any sense. And we have no way of actually knowing how many ounces are in a Tomahawk missile.
Hey, that's perfect. And the second one is, with regards outside of Tomahawk missiles, is there's this in our channel, we've talked about it in the past, where if you don't hold it, you don't own it. But then there's this hybrid approach of also bringing up, hey, you should also consider vaulting your precious metals in order to just segment where your allocations are to just protect your wealth. What is your opinion with vaulting silver and metals?
Yeah, great question. This is something I touch on a nightly place on our spaces. Here's what I say for the vast majority of Americans: you want to hold a certain allocation in your possession at home, whether it's buried in your backyard or stored in multiple locations, etc. The caveat to that is, you don't want to be a sitting duck. You don't want to have your entire net worth in one location, and God forbid you get robbed, you get held at gunpoint, something terrible happens, you lose everything you've worked your entire life for. So for most people, I think you're probably safe to hold maybe 5 figures worth of gold and silver in your possession, maybe 25, maybe $50,000. I think you're okay with that. But once you start exceeding that, in my opinion, probably like a $50,000 limit mark, I think you want to find a vaulting service that is allocated, that's private, that the entity actually owns the vault itself. There's no third party conflictions where you think you're actually vaulting with company X, but company X actually vaults through Brinks and there's other entities involved. You want to cut out the middleman and deal directly with the vaulting providers that actually own their own vault. So I'm an advocate for it. I'm not against it. I have many people in the community that have six figures, seven figures plus, and none of those guys are keeping $500,000, $1 million, $10 million of silver and gold in their home. That's ludicrous. You're asking for all the bad things to happen to you. Those guys vault their metals. I think it's a no-brainer. You have to vault once you hit a certain net worth.
Great. Thank you for bringing that up. Is here at Summit Metals, we do a lot of vaulting, and it's all private with us. And it's a very weird dynamic because the entire world says if you don't own it, you don't hold it, but they don't get the full picture of yeah, it's true. It's just don't have all of it in one location. Actually separate it, especially when it's in these very large numbers. But that helps. So we're pretty much wrapping up here. This is really good. I mean, everyone here, they're called a stacker community. Thank you for being stackers with Summit Metals. If you really like this interview, please just like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. We have here a Summit Metals silver round, and we're going to give it away to a couple of viewers here. All you have to do is leave a comment down below and just let us know, what did you learn today from Silver Degen? We're going to pick a couple of folks down there and send you some silver rounds. And so you can elevate your wealth.